Hello and welcome to episode 54 of the 40 Athletes Podcast. I'm your co-host Jason Holzer, along with my good friend Jimmy Huber. Jimmy, man, I think you're more excited about this guest than I am today because of the background with Oklahoma Sooners, Dallas
Oh
Cowboys.
yeah. And somebody that loves basketball, loves coaching, loves teaching, making people better. You got me pumped up. I did some research on Coach Cole. I'm like, gosh, dang, it's like a soulmate. I'm ready to go.
Well, Jimmy, every episode we try to pack in so much great knowledge to help our listeners transform and positively influence themselves and their players around them. So this week we're joined by Sherri Coale, legendary basketball coach of the Oklahoma Sooners. She's a four-time Big 12 Coach of the Year, the winningest coach in OU history, and she went to the Women's Hall of Fame in 2016. But I think probably her most impressive accomplishment is her K Yao Cancer Fund Impact Award. It really shows her like the impact she has off the court is much greater than what she did on the court.
Hey, by the way, too, Jason, you kind of missed this. She took a team one game away from winning the national championship, too. All right. So she did that as well. She did some amazing things. So let's bring her on and let's
All
get
right, here we
to
go.
know Coach Cole.
Coach Cole, good morning to you.
Hey guys, good morning. How are you?
We're doing well, thanks.
Before Jason jumps in, I got to say, seriously, Roger Staubach, Dallas Cowboy football, you brought that up, right? And then Boomer Sooners back in the day. I used to sit there. I loved back in the day, Oklahoma football. Thanksgiving time, when it's the Big Eight, they used to have Oklahoma, Nebraska, right? The big game. I used to gear up for that game. I used to love Billy Sims. And so you start talking football. I didn't know you were a football lady. Football and basketball. Huh?
I grew up in Southern Oklahoma. How do you not like football? If we were running around playing on Saturday and the game came on TV, we were supposed to stop and stand at attention while that was happening. So I grew up on it as well. Billy Sims yelling Boomer and Steve Davis throwing touchdown passes. And I loved Tinker Owens. Steve was my boss for a bit at Oklahoma as an interim athletic director. I used to tease him all the time. I said, I know you got the Heisman, but I loved your brother Tinker.
Well, let's go ahead and dive into it. Some of the things we talked about. So when you started program at Oklahoma, you took over a basketball career in what, like 1996, and you were a high school coach before that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so it took you about 4 years to get to 500 and then 5 years to win 20 games. So in our society where like instant gratification is like, hey, you got to win now or you're not successful, how are you able to practice patience, stay the course of what you believed to build that great program and not try to get the shortcuts to get those quick wins?
Well, things were different. I can tell you that. In 1996, there's always been a need or a desire for instant gratification, but 1996 was different than 2021. And I was very fortunate that the time that I got the job at the University of Oklahoma, women's basketball was just on the cusp of exploding. So it wasn't, the salaries weren't like they are now. The platform was not like it is now. I'll never forget the first Big 12 conference meeting I went to, which was my first year. My first year at Oklahoma was the inception of the Big 12 League. And I remember them talking to us about our television package. And every school was going to get 2 games guaranteed to be televised, one at home and one on the road. Some might get a couple more, but every school in the league would get 2. And this was a huge deal. So now we're in a land of my last, 10 years maybe at Oklahoma. Every game was broadcast on some television network, whether it be ESPN or Fox or some regional distribution or a local Sooner Sports Properties distribution. So the landscape was really, really different. And with that came a little bit more grace and the ability to build a program in the right way so that it has a foundation that it can stand on for a long, long time. And I was very, very fortunate to get into this business at that time and to work for people who believed in making something that lasts, and they weren't about quick fixes. I had an amazing administration that was supportive. An athletic director, Joe Castiglione, came in the second year that I was at Oklahoma and was my athletic director for the entire duration. An amazing supportive leader. And so I had the opportunity to build it well and build it in the right way.
You think about that. You've been blessed because Joe's been there like how many years? Like 20 something. How long has he been there now?
Yeah, probably 23. I coached there for 25, and he came in 2 years after. So he's nearing his 25th quarter of a century celebration too.
What you hear it, I heard this before when I started coaching. It was like George Allen, the great football coach, said that winning reinstates life, losing takes it out of you. And you think about how many coaches, when they start coaching, they want to win, and they start losing and they start to get down on themselves and they lose energy whatsoever. What's your suggestions for coaches to be able to stay balanced, to understand, don't let the highs be too highs, the lows be too lows when you're starting to maybe lose games and you're struggling, you're trying to build that culture?
Boy, that's the $60 million question, right? I think it has to do with a couple of things. First of all, what do you define yourself by? If you define yourself only by outcomes, it's going to be a tough career, because one guy, one person at the end of a basketball season is going to be the one on top. Everybody else is going to be a loser at the end. And so, one might lose more than another, but nobody's going to end a winner but one guy. So if you're defined totally by your outcomes, it's going to be a very, very difficult road. So I think that's part of it, knowing who you are and being able to separate who you are from what you do. And I think the second part of that is being able to articulate what winning is. So, for example, my first year at Oklahoma, a win for us was to get through a 2-hour practice in the right way. That means with immersion, with physical and mental energy, with high emotion, with teamwork, with addiction almost to improvement. Be able to, at the end of those 2 hours, look out and say, boy, we did it. Every one of us did it. That was a win. It wasn't beating Texas or beating Texas A&M or Oklahoma State. That wasn't it at that time. In accordance with that, in 2003, the year after we went to the Final Four, a win wasn't going to the Final Four anymore. A win was, can you go get a national championship? So those things change depending on where you are. And I think every coach, I was talking to a coach a couple of weeks ago who lost his leading scorer to a season-ending injury before the season even got going. You might have to adjust what a win looks like for your team now. You've got to be a little bit realistic while you're being optimistic. And I think that's what keeps you moving in a positive direction.
Hey, by the way, I want to tell anyone that's out there, and that we'll be able to, at the end, kind of tell us how to kind of contact you, see your information, whatever. But you have a heck of a blog. I love your blog. And one thing, a couple of your blogs remind me kind of John Wooden. It's like, as a coach, you understand you're a teacher. You talk about the most important thing is being a teacher, but sometimes we get pressured or we feel that winning's the most important thing on the scoreboard, right? So when you talk about before, like the different wins, it could be just having a good practice, not just win on the scoreboard. What's your suggestion to coaches to be that teacher, to not get pressured in, just win on a scoreboard, and use the sport of basketball to teach?
I think it's really, really hard, especially depending on the level that you're at right now. I mean, look at Division I college football right now. If you don't win, you don't have a job tomorrow. You don't get to teach. It's amazing what's going on in that landscape right now. And I hate it for coaches because it's really, really hard to keep your focus on the most important thing when you know that's looming, or the potential of that is looming. But again, I think it has to go back to your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it to make $1 gazillion? Are you doing it to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated? Or are you doing it because you want a kid to learn what it means to take a charge for your whole team, and how that translates to life beyond the line? So it's an easy thing to talk about, guys. It's a really hard thing to do when you're in the middle of that pressure cooker.
Hey, when you talk about that, teaching somebody how to take a charge for a team, take me back. This is a legendary story I've heard about Coach Coale. USA basketball, coaching it. You got a UConn player. I don't remember the UConn player was a stud, right? And you have practice. And it's kind of the old going back to Dean Smith, the Carolina way, right? Acknowledging your teammate for a pass. Now, tell me if this is true. So the individual got a good pass or whatever, scored, was running back, didn't acknowledge the teammate. You stop practice, and I maybe let them know that that's not the way to go about it. Is that true? Tell me a little bit about that story if it is.
Absolutely. You don't get any points. If somebody throws you the ball and you score, that basket's just negated. That's the way it works. It always worked that way in our practice, and we made it that way in USA basketball wherever we went. And what it's about is really translating selflessness. When you point to the guy who passed you the ball, you're giving accolades and attention and energy to the guy that most people in the gym aren't looking at. Everybody in the gym's looking at you if you scored. So you're transferring that and you're sharing it with your team. And it's just one of those acts that players can really buy into. You know, they get excited about that. I used to say, Erin Higgins played for us at Oklahoma, and she made threes from Mars. But what she did better than anybody on the planet was point at the guy who passed her the ball. And it happened immediately, and it happened every time. And it gave such juice to our team as a result of that. So it's one of those things that it mattered, and it had a lesson that translated beyond the basketball floor, but it was also really fun. It was a fun thing to do.
But I see this. What do you tell coach? Sometimes they're afraid to challenge the best players. They're afraid to hold the top players accountable because they think they might lose and they might go somebody else. Like you're taking a player, a UConn, a All-American, a top player, and you're holding her accountable. What's your message to coaches on that?
Well, I think really great players want to be held accountable. I really do. I think the best crave that. And in this day and age, might they get up and leave? Absolutely. That's a roll of the dice. You have to decide as a coach what's most important for you and then stand on that. And the really, really good ones, they want to be coached. They want to be pushed. They want to be held accountable. They want to be responsible, not only for their own improvement, but for being the best they can be for their team. And I think you find out maybe a lot about that very thin line that sometimes separates the good from the great.
You know, and Sherri, I know whenever I coached, there was a lot of times where I would get like really into it, really passionate about it. But you wrote a blog called Don't Mess with Happy. And like, you know, I know for myself, I would get frustrated maybe about outcomes or how games were going. At times I would lose like my happiness wagon, right? And I always say, pull your own happiness wagon. So what is your message on that? Like, what do you mean by don't mess with happy? And how do we apply that, whether we're coaching, whether we're in life, whether like whatever we're doing, you know, how do we like not mess with happy?
You know, I think it's human nature to kind of look across at your neighbor's yard and think the grass is a little bit better over there. Wish you had what somebody else had. Everybody's got problems. Everybody's got challenges. You know, we're starting the basketball season and going into it. A Division II coach has challenges. A Division I top 10 team has challenges. A mid-level that's not expected to win any games has challenges. Everybody has them. They're just different. And I think part of being able to really feel fulfilled, which I think is sometimes different from happy, is being able to appreciate what you do have and spend more time thinking about that than you do the things that you don't. And I know for coaches, it can be, again, if you're outcome based, if you're really only tied to the results, it can be a really, really difficult journey. But if you can let your happiness reside in a light bulb moment for a kid, or a play that's run really beautifully, or a defensive stop that reeks of toughness and sacrifice, those are the things, if you can keep your focus on those things, then I think you maintain a modicum of joy at all times. And that really is, that's really what the pursuit is about. You know, you'll be happy when you win games, but you can be joyful whether you win them or not.
Yeah, and like that's another thing you talk about is reclaiming joy, right? That's that inner peace, that inner gladness. You know, so what are some ways that you have found that no matter what's going on the scoreboard or in life, the challenges you face, you're able to still fulfill that joy? What are some strategies you put in your own life, some things you do day to day to make sure you have that feeling of joy and it carries through with no matter what you do?
Well, I think it begins with self-awareness, with knowing what fulfills you. What do you enjoy? I used to tell our players when they couldn't decide, like, you know, what do I want to be when I grow up? As all college kids, they get to that point, like, eventually I'm not going to get to do this anymore. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I used to tell them to make a list of the things that they love to do. Like, nobody made you. You woke up today. What would you want to do? Make that list. And then make a list of things that you're really good at, and you know that you've had success with, or people tell you they appreciate about you, whatever that is. And then connect those, and the spots where those connect will tell you the direction to take in your life. And I think choosing to live and swim in your lane of strength, if you will, is one way to do that. I think another is obviously to count your blessings every single day, to just look at the things that you have to be grateful for. And again, focus on what you have rather than what you don't have or what someone else might have. So self-awareness and introspection and gratitude and service would be the last of those. I mean, we all know we can all think back to a time when we're just having a really rotten day and we do something for someone else. It might be opening the door for somebody at a restaurant. It might be taking a brown bag of food to a in-home elderly person who's part of Meals on Wheels. I mean, it could be anything. But whatever kind of day we're having, the moment we serve, that day gets better. And so introspection, knowing yourself, being grateful, expressing that gratitude and serving others is the best way I know to find that joy and keep it regardless of what you're doing.
I think when that Don't Mess with Happy, when I've read that blog, it reminded me of kind of a coach that I played for used to always say the grass is always greener on the other side, but that grass has to be mowed too. And not everyone likes to mow that grass. And you write the article related to Jay Wright at Villanova, saying like how many years people try to pull him away from Villanova, a better job somewhere else, but he stays, right? Because he's happy in that place. And I feel like too many times as coaches, we get in positions where we're like, what's next? I want this, I want that, right? And we're never happy where we're at. We're never like making this the best place, right? You always say, make this the best place that you're at currently right there. What is your message for coaches to be able to be present, to make the place you're at the best place and not focus on trying to go somewhere else?
You know, I had such a great example of that in my life. Dan Hayes was the men's basketball coach at Oklahoma Christian College. His first year there was as I was playing on the women's team, and I got to watch him build his program. And through the years, I mean, when he was building his program, I thought, gosh, this guy's really, really good. And I wrote down, I used to sit in his practice after mine was over. I get a big jug of water and sit down in his practice, take notes. I still have in a recipe box over here in my office all of his practice plans that I took notes from. So then I go to coach at Norman High School, and I kind of use that blueprint. And then I go from Norman High School to OU, and I kind of use that blueprint. And at the time I thought, gosh, he's really good. But until I moved up in the coaching ranks, did I realize how good he is. He spent his entire career, basically, had a few jobs before, but he spent his entire career basically at Oklahoma Christian College in a very small niche sort of place. He coached in USA basketball with Jim Boeheim and a number of folks. He is incredibly well respected in basketball circles. He spent his entire coaching career basically at Oklahoma Christian College. Why? Because it aligned with him. It aligned with his morals and his values. It was in an environment where he could really teach kids and push them in the right way. And he got great results and great satisfaction and great fulfillment from that. He could have gone anywhere. He chose not to go anywhere because he selected a place that fit him, a place that fit his family. And he was happy and he recognized that. And so I think I was very fortunate to have an example like that in my life at a very pivotal time where I never felt the need. And people ask me a lot, you know, like, how did you plan to get that job at Oklahoma while you were coaching at Norman High School? And I have to giggle because I never planned on that, ever. I wanted to be a high school coach and teacher because the most influential people in my life had been outside my family, had been my high school coaches and teachers. And so that's what I was doing. And the only drawback I saw in coaching was the fact that there's a very nomadic lifestyle associated with it often. And I didn't want to move around all the time. I wanted my kids to have a home that they grew up in. And so I was so happy at Norman High School, teaching and grading papers and doing signing up for the yellow bus that's going to take your team across town to play on Friday night. I mean, that's what I love doing. And this opportunity presented itself in this community. It was just a really rare and special God thing that I got this opportunity. I was able to raise my children in this home that we've had for 34 years. I didn't have to have the nomadic lifestyle and move all across the country and put my kids in different places. And so I was happy and another happy thing. And I can say the same thing now as a retired coach. This is another happy. You open the door to another happy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the door that they world, things you should open. You know, I'm sure everybody thought Dan Hayes should have gone on and become a Division I coach now, but it's not the real decision. It's what was in himself well enough to know when he could do that.
Jace.
Yeah, can you hear? Sorry.
No, I can't. Or you might have told Sherri like her audio's cutting out.
Can we hear you better?
You can hear me, or you can't?
Now we can hear you. There we go. Yeah, you got quiet on us a little bit there. So sorry.
You guys went quiet on me too.
Okay, it happens. It's all good. And Sherri, you know, the one thing you did mention was like you were able to raise your family, and you didn't have to like make that nomadic, you know, journey of a coach. And I feel like a lot of people in coaching feel like they have to choose family or coaching career. What would your suggestion be if you wanted to have a family, if you wanted that family lifestyle, if you wanted both? How can you make both happen? Because it seemed like you were a great example of being able to do that.
Well, it's about priorities, first and foremost. I can tell you, as I boxed up an office after spending 25 years in the same spot, that those plaques and trophies aren't very good bedfellows at the end of the day. So the family piece, you got to find a way to put that first. And I wove my family into my job. I just think coaching it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. It's a way of life. I was never off. When I went to Target, I was still the coach at Oklahoma. If I went to the movies, I was still the coach at Oklahoma. You're never off. And so to try to separate the family would have been very, very difficult for me. I had a lot of help. I mean, you got to have help. And I was very fortunate in that I had family nearby. And I know some people don't. They live across the country from their family. And I would say to them, pick a new one in addition to the one you have, obviously, but gather some folks nearby who can help you. We used to jokingly say that my kids were the only one who had 12 people on the pickup list at school. Like, you know how you got to sign people are allowed to pick up your kids? Well, I was there, and if I couldn't, then my grandmother could, and if she couldn't, then my secretary could, and if she couldn't, then, and it was just a list of people that might show up to pick up Chandler and Colton from school. And it was great. It was just a great way. A lot of people love them. And I always tell young parents, don't be afraid if there's a large group of people who your kids are comfortable with and who love them. They can never get too much love. It's impossible. So extend that circle and let them have a lot of those relationships and build that family away from home if you don't have that family nearby, because you can't do it by yourself. You do need help.
What would you say this, Coach Coale, if the Coach Coale today, and you went back to Coach Coale young Coach Coale starting in coaching, you go back and say, these are the lessons I've learned that I wish young Coach Coale would have known at that time, what would they have been?
Don't take everything so personally. When your team plays bad, it's not because they don't like you. It's not because they're mad at you. It's not because they're trying to get back at you. I would have, I think I would have practiced more patience, for sure. I would have asked more questions. You know, that's something that I learned late in my coaching career, and would love for young coaches to know how important it is to ask as a part of the teaching process. We as coaches are just unbelievable tellers by trade, right? Put your left foot there, put your right foot here, lower your hips, look here, raise there. And all of a sudden our players feel like robots walking around, right? Well, they learn so much better by asking questions. My last couple of years at a timeout, I would say, okay, tell me what's happening out there. What'd you get snagged on? What do you see? The whole timeouts would just be a series of questions. And I think that's where the real learning occurs. It's not always comfortable. And for coaches, it can be very awkward in practice to ask a lot of questions instead of tell a lot of answers. But that's where that rut is made in a person's brain. That's where the myelin sheath gets involved, and they actually learn and retain things when they have to search and reach and grapple for those answers. So I think being a question asker would be at the top of the list. And then one other thing I would say to young coaches is that context matters more than anything. You know, when I was coaching high school, one of our boys teams was unbelievable in warm up. Like they ran these drills that could have rivaled the Harlem Globetrotters. I mean, it was good stuff. Bing, 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 bing. Ball never touched the floor. Looks incredible. They go to play. They don't play like that at all. You're like, where did that team go that was just warming up? Well, we all kind of get caught up in that as coaches. We want our practices to be pretty. We want everything to hum and fly along, and we can get really addicted to drills. You know, I do clinics and coaches would say, give me some drills or give me some plays. They want things. And concepts are way more important, things that make you think. And the best drills we ever had for our team were ones that came out of, man, we're not good at feeding the post from the top of the floor, from the middle of the floor. We stink at that. How can we devise a drill to get better at that thing? That's where drills became important for us. Play small games, play tons and tons and tons of small games with lots of repetitions so that things feel different. Yeah. You know, notorious early in my career for if we miss a bunch of layups, come in and we're going to make 50 layups in a row, right? Well, there's no defense out there. And it's not at all like what just happened in the game that caused us to miss 5 out of 10 layups. So you got to create those situations that transfer the information and the learning. And I don't think I was good at that early in my career.
Well, like you said, almost make practices like the games. When they get in the games, they've been there before. But I want to go back to the blogs you've had. And you talk about asking questions. And you have a blog about monkey business. And I love what you say on this. You said, if curious players are auctioned for their coaches, they are sticking for their teams, right? Questions are the burps that follow the internal digestion of interest and concern, a deep desire to understand. Teammates who want to know who they're lined up alongside or endear themselves to one another. My question for you is this. So coaches can ask questions and get dialogue back from the players, right? What do you do in practices and maybe in the locker room to get the teammates to start asking questions to each other, to start connecting more?
Well, I think you do a lot of that off the floor, obviously, and it carries over onto the floor. Different things from if you're traveling and you're staying in hotels, change those rooming lists all the time. Get people in seats beside people that they wouldn't ordinarily go sit beside. You can jumpstart and stimulate some of those conversations with just little types of questions that you pose for them to share with one another. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately going to be time spent together. So if you're doing community service, pair these two guys up to go help this guy plant a tree and make them work together. And they're going to find some commonalities. They're going to connect in ways that they wouldn't if they didn't have that time alone opportunity. And I think now more than ever, you have to script those. And it's one of those things that you really want in your gut. You want it to be organic. You know, you want it to just happen. With technology as it is today, you got to put these phones in a pile and send them off and give them a little scripted guidance to jumpstart it. People always gravitate to that. They always, at the end of the day, gravitate to the human connection. Tell me about what it was like when you grew up. And those kinds of answers then fuel other questions. But you got to strip all this stuff that's easy and comfortable away sometimes so that you can get them to have that opportunity. And it's tough today.
I love what you mentioned about the community service to kind of build the bonds. And you talk about that you used to really kind of get involved with Children's Hospital in Oklahoma City, right? And you would go there. And what I love what you mentioned on it, you talk about we learn a lot in those situations, but it helps us to learn how to be more present in our lives, right? Shifts the perspective. And you talk about like Keaton, a 7-year-old kid that started this like kindness club, right? So a couple things I want to get into on that is one is like community service, getting kids to help others, to get them to get outside themselves, to realize, change their perspective. Their life's probably pretty good, right? To be more present. And then how can we tend to be more kind to others, since to me, the world needs more kindness right now?
No question. Keaton was an amazing, amazing young soul that continues to affect lives through what he set in motion. It was really amazing to be a part of. When I cleaned out my office, back in the spring when I retired. I had an entire plastic tub that was just dedicated for memorabilia from children whose lives I had crossed paths with through the years with the work at Children's Hospital. And every single one of them left the world in a better position than it was in when they arrived. And it's amazing to me that children with cancer can do that. And some of us who get 10 times that amount of time on this planet don't do that with our days. And so it's a very real sort of recalibration, I think, to take a group of college kids into an environment like that and see not just Children's Hospital, but we'll use that as an example now, as to see those children dealing with reality in an optimistic way. And I think that's where we sometimes get out of line in our own lives. We think that we're either optimists or pessimists, and the people who are really living and making a difference are neither. They're realists who are choosing to have an unwavering belief that at the end of the day, everything's going to be good. You're going to figure out a way to make it good. Sometimes for those kids, it was death. Death isn't good, but the way in which they live translated. And so to be able to share those opportunities with young people is fantastic. And our players loved it. They loved the chance to be involved with the community. And it's one of those things that takes us off subject, but we can whip right back around. That's a little disconcerting sometimes with legislation and control that comes from the NCAA. Everything comes with unintended consequences when they start trying to tell you how many hours a week you can practice. Well, with that chops off some time that you can go spend with Meals on Wheels or at Children's Hospital, because there's this big formula that you have to plug it into. And it gets really difficult, I think, to do some of the things that are the lifeblood of the experience for collegiate athletes, and giving back randomly and often and regularly and in any way you feel compelled to do so is part of that experience as a student athlete. And so I'm very grateful that the lion's share of our teams got to be involved with as much as they wanted, as often as they wanted, without restraint.
Hey, Coach Coale, I have to tell you this. You got kind of Jason excited when he started looking at some of your information, because he's in the Ted Lasso fan club too. Okay. He's a Ted Lasso guy. So go into Ted Lasso, Jason, and start talking to Coach Coale about Ted Lasso. Here we go.
Well, I love how you talked about how he uses his brilliance not to bulldoze people, but to lift other people up in a great position, like when the dart game against Rebecca's ex, or like using the trick plays in order to give these people a chance to lift them up, and just kind of going into like, how do you use your brilliance in a way that doesn't make you feel like pompous or arrogant, but use it in a way to uplift others, like you mentioned, to give other people a chance of hope, right? And that's kind of like that Ted Lasso feeling. So if you would mind diving into that, like, how do you use some of the brilliance that you've gained, some of the wisdom, some of the knowledge to help uplift others and not necessarily just like yourself?
Well, first of all, I don't think I have any brilliance to offer. I have experience, and I think we can learn from one another, from people who have walked down the path that we're trying to walk down. And so I think at the crux of it, Jason, is Ted Lasso as a character never thinks of himself first. And that's why he's a character, first of all, because it's really, really hard for people, real humans, to do. But his example is one of others first, others first, others first. And that's what allows him to, I guess, endure is the word I'm searching for there. He endures some personal, when you think about what Rebecca did to him, bringing him in so that he could fail. She wanted the franchise to fail. And that incredible scene in Ted Lasso where she comes in because she's gotten to see what he's like, what he's about. He's made her life better. He's making the team better. He's making the world better in his range of influence. And she comes in and asks for his forgiveness and tells him that basically she just says, "This is what I've done. I'm sorry. You can hate me forever if you want to. I probably would if I were you." And he forgives her, right? That's very, very, he's endured something very painful, but he was able to kind of shove his pain to the side and go to where she was. And he says to her something like, divorce is hard. I know it's difficult. And so I forgive you. And that takes a very, I think, well-lived person to be able to do that. In terms of, when I say well-lived, I mean, you just have to have gone through some things to be able to ultimately have that perspective. And I think that's sort of the underbelly of his philosophy in dealing with others, is he just uses his personal experiences to try to make their lives better by always thinking about what they need rather than what he wants them to have.
Yeah, I think, like, cool thing is, like, he never takes things personal. Like, he's like, he's always kind of like, he brought her biscuits like from day one. Like, that's just what he did no matter what. Like, he was consistent, he was empathetic. And too many times I feel like people, something happens to them, they get bitter about it, or they get angry or resentful. And I think that character is a great example of like how to take painful moments but be more empathetic. Like, how do we be more empathetic to others? Not necessarily sympathy to feel sorry for people, but how do we develop that skill of empathy and understanding, but still be able to challenge people to make themselves better? Because it's a fine line of being empathetic, but not like enabling.
Right. Well, empathy means I'm feeling with you. And so I think you have to, as an old high school teacher, meet them where they are. It doesn't matter where you think they should be or where they want to be, or any of those things. What matters is where they are right now. And so you go there, and that's the empathetic spot that you try to begin conversations with, that you try to have influence through. But I think more than anything, it starts with, again, caring about them first, thinking more about the person and where they are. And one of the things that I found interesting when you try to teach college age athletes about empathy is, and I used to do an experiment, or not experiment, a little role play in our locker room sometimes, that, like, how many of you have divorced parents? Well, some of them did. Okay. Those of you who don't have divorced parents, do you know how they feel? No, I couldn't possibly know how they feel. Well, really? And then we would start to unpack, how do you feel if your parents were divorced? I'm just pulling that one out of the air. It could be anything. But if you came from a divorced family, how did that make you feel? They may list some things. And then, all right, ask the people who didn't, have you ever felt like that? Yeah, I did, when this happened or that happened or that happened. Okay, well, there's your empathy point. And now, because you share what that feeling is, doesn't have to be the same circumstance. You share that feeling. Now you got a spot where you can meet and move forward. And that just takes a little bit of humility, for sure, a whole lot of grace, and a whole lot of a servant attitude.
Someone want to flow into, we get into Ted Lasso and, Jay Sudeikis and the team behind that. They use their imagination to create this right character in this episode that basically is impacting others. And you have a blog that talks about imagination's more important than really knowledge, right? And you talk about in there, like, information might be the boots we wear to work in, but imagination is the blood flow that makes us move our feet. And you talk about Irvin Johnson. He became magic because he used his imagination. What can you tell individuals about how to start using more of our imagination that maybe gets dwarfed after we're kids because people tell us not to, but how we can use it to create maybe a life that we desire, a life that can impact others in a positive way?
I think it's really hard because there's so much information coming at us that we don't have room. I don't think it's so much that people or teachers, I think teachers in general are so much better now than when you and I grew up, especially when I grew up, in terms of just giving you some freedom to color outside the lines or think differently or approach a subject from a lot of different vantage points. There's a lot more creativity in the classroom now than there was years ago. But I think there is, again, an unintended consequence of this information age, that you're constantly being told what you should think about, how you should think about it. And you're never forced to wrestle with an idea to figure out how you really do think about it. And those think muscles, they just wither away if you don't use them. And, it's like traveling with the GPS, right? We all have them in our cars. When I would go recruiting, I would pick one trip, and this is pretty lame that it was just one trip, but I would pick one trip every summer in the month of July where I would turn my GPS off. And I would have to find the gym from the airport based on maybe a written piece of paper. I knew what exit to take or what freeway or whatever. And then when I would leave the gym to go back and forth to my hotel, I would spend that trip doing it from my mind rather than from my GPS, because I think we can just get so stuck. And when we don't use those muscles, we lose them. You used to know everybody's phone number. You don't know anybody's phone number now because you don't have to, because it's in your phone. So I think that curiosity and imagination are things that you have to utilize regularly. And when you think about our great athletes, it's always how do I phrase it? It's always the thing that we could never have, we can barely comprehend and could never have created, that makes us go, wow. Magic was just so different. And we fell in love with him, and the Showtime Lakers were born from him because he had that pizzazz about him. You could say the same about Kobe. I mean, you can go down the list. There are players, as I mentioned in that blog, I talked about Bubba Watson's toe putt, right? I don't know if anybody ever saw that, but what a way. Turn the putter backward. Like, what? Guys that can think that way amaze us, and then they open up our minds to be able to think in those ways ourselves. And it was Einstein who said that imagination is more important than knowledge, and I'll give him credit for that every single day. He should know, right?
Don't you think, though, as coaches, sometimes you go back and talk about Magic and him on the court, and I've been there as a coach. Sometimes we restrict maybe kids, and we have a certain way it needs to be done. It becomes robotic, and we take away that imagination, that freedom on the floor, that creativity. Do you see that as sometimes as coaches we do that?
Oh, yeah. And I did that some. I was definitely guilty of that some. Stacey Dales was an unbelievable example of freedom. I gave her the freedom to throw paint wherever she wanted to throw it. The first time I watched her play as a high school player in Canada, I knew this kid sees things differently. She sees what the rest of us don't. And so the best gift I can give her as her coach is to give her the freedom to act upon what she sees. And she was fantastic. An All-American for us, led us to the Final Four and final national championship game in 2002. She was incredible. And I think that we have to give up some control to do that as coaches. I always loved running motion offense because I didn't always know what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And there was a beauty in that. I used to tell people, they would ask about, that backdoor play where Lanisha Caulfield cuts and Dales throws it to her. And I'm like, yeah, it's not really a play, but yeah. Well, how do you tell me about that? Well, I don't know about that because that thing just happens when the two of them look at the defense and make a decision and do what they do because they're human beings and they're very unique. And I stand up and clap with the rest of you guys when that happens. My role in that was giving them the space to do it, period. And I think as coaches, we got to do that. I watch we'll talk football for a second here. Our quarterback right now, Caleb Williams, when he gets out of the pocket, look out. Like if I was the opposing defense, I would say if he got out of the pocket, I just put my hands on my head and go, I don't know what we do now, because the stuff that's going to happen there is going to be completely unscripted. He's going to throw a 40-yard bomb while he's running sideways. I mean, who does that? You don't teach that at quarterback camp, but that's the really cool stuff that makes us so good and makes our offense so potent. And so you kind of got to give athletes room to do that. Of course, they have to have a certain level of skill. And of course, you have to teach them how to dribble, pass, catch, and shoot. And there's certainly technique involved in that. But once there is a certain level of ability or aptitude, open the doors and the windows. They'll surprise you and thrill you with what they do.
Hey, Coach Coale, the KU Jayhawks, they experience imagination by the quarterback on the fourth down play, right?
Yeah.
Back and take off and get the first down. That's imagination right there, right?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I do want to get into a couple more things before we wrap up. One is this: you talk about, you recruited an individual that played in Canada, and when you recruit, you deal with parents, and you see a lot of high school coaches I'll talk to, or people maybe in youth sports, like the parents can be a pain in the butt, man. They just don't understand. What are suggestions you can give the coaches that can help them to be able to communicate better with parents, to be able to connect maybe better with them, that they're not so much difficult to work with while they're coaching their children?
Well, that's a loaded question. I had a parent asked me, I was speaking at a high school a couple of weeks ago, and had a parent ask me what advice I could give her as her child went off to college to play competitive sports. And I said, don't ever ask her about basketball. I would always tell my parents that on the first day meeting that I had when parents brought their kids to campus, don't call them and ask them about basketball. If they want to talk to you about basketball, they'll talk to you about basketball. Call them and ask them about the food in the dorm. Ask them about their teachers. Ask them if they've been to the movie. Ask them about their roommate. Ask them about anything you want, but not the sport, because kids carry with them this feeling, justified or not, that they're representing so many people. They're carrying the flag for their family, their school, their hometown, maybe their state, and they need some room to be college kids and to be valued for more than just what they do. And that's so hard for parents because they want to know how practice went, and they want to know how you played today, and they want to know if you're going to get to start, and how's coach going to use you, and all that stuff. And when the athlete wants to know, the athlete will tell you, be about all those other things. But that's for parents, and you ask for coaches. And I think the best you can do is to be clear and to ask them to let you coach their children. Ask them to give you that privilege, and then understand what a responsibility that is, obviously. But there are so many voices for kids these days, not just coming from their parents, comes from their trainers and their coaches and their cousins and their handlers and all kinds of people. But there are so many voices in their head that it can be really, really difficult. And I think it all begins as sort of a blanket answer to your question with understanding the fact that the most important person to those parents is their kid. While the kid is incredibly important to you, there are lots of kids who are important to you as the coach. And so the lens you look through is really different. And that goes back to that empathy point. If you can understand that and meet them there, you can sort of unpack that. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was I was a high school assistant coach. And the boys coach at our school told me, you know what your job is when a parent is angry or frustrated or you're having some sort of conflict? Your job is to help them through the moment. And it really hit me. My job's not to tell them why I'm right and why they're wrong. My job is not to make anything different than what it is, to distort reality, to make them feel good. My job is to help them get through that moment. And so if you can step out of being the coach who's got to decide lineups and plays to run and depth charts and all those things, and you can help that human being as a parent who is concerned about the most important person in their life, then you can get to a ground where there can be a civil discourse, and you may never ever agree, but you can get to a point where the athlete has the best possible chance to be successful, and that should be the goal.
I know as Jason's getting ready to wrap up and something, I do want to go into. I didn't realize you had your PhD.
I
And I
know.
didn't realize you taught classes at Oklahoma, but you teach the clapping school. And when I was reading that blog about the clapping school, it reminded me when you're in practice and you're clapping, like, come on, you got some guy, right? They're clapping, right? They're giving you the fake clap. And I always hear it like, you can't have any bad practices. You got to bring positive energy to practice, right? So I love when I was reading that, because you talk about you got to learn how to clap, right? And you talk about like clap, getting your hands together, like popping that. So would you tell coaches how you do it? Do you get people in a circle and then you have one person clap at one time, and then it goes to the next person? You're trying to teach them how to clap, or they got to show how to clap? How does this work?
That's so funny that you asked that. I got a text message from one of my former players yesterday, and it just said, love your blog. Thanks so much, coach. And then in parenthesis, especially the one about clapping school, with a whole bunch of exclamation marks, because she remembers the exercise, of course. But literally, we would circle up at the start of practice, be in a circle. We talk about the thought for the day, the offensive and defensive emphasis. And I only did it if I felt like, we had gyms that had an issue with that. We had players who it didn't happen every year, but it happened more than it didn't. And I would just simply say, all right, we're going to go around the circle and clap. Ready, Gabby, go. And, kids just die right there. They just melt on the floor right there. Oh my God. And the reactions you get is some are like, they'll clap 2 times and go, I don't know. Was that good? Was that like, when do you ever wonder if clapping is good? Like, you're at a concert and the guy comes out, you start clapping. You don't wonder, did I do that right? But that's what happens in that circle. And then you have the really earnest ones, that where they're going to show you and they clap really, 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 really hard. And then their hands hurt and they're shaking their hands and everybody's fidgeting. And it's just very, very uncomfortable. But it takes about 30 seconds because you just go, okay, thank you. Next. And you don't have to say that was good. That was bad. That was, what are you doing? You don't say anything. You just next. And by the time you get to the end, the exercise has taught it for you. And they understand that their own comfort level and their own willingness to give is all that controls that. And it's the kind of thing that sticks with you, for a long, long time.
Hey, Jace, as you wrap this up, you remind me on that at a concert. And I had to think about you because I was at a concert recently with an Oklahoma Sooner fan that was leading the concert was Toby Keith. I was up in Iowa City, and he had a concert starting to get out, and it was Toby Keith. I was clapping for Toby Keith. Give him the clap. Norman, Oklahoma.
Just saw Toby last night, and he's an easy one to clap for. I'll tell you that. What a great fan of Oklahoma athletics he is, but what an amazing artist. I've never thought he got enough credit for being the artist that he is. He sings these bad, tough songs and just his style. There's such artistry underneath all that. He's brilliant. You want to talk about brilliant? That guy's brilliant. So glad you brought him up.
Hey, he did that American Soldier song. And it was flute and everybody. I mean, it was like at the end, I was like, oh my God. I mean, it's like your heart goes into it. But Jason, you can go to the wrap up, but I had to bring that up. So go ahead.
Yeah. And yesterday being Veterans Day, it's a great song to salute those that serve our country too, So I mean, I'm a Toby Keith fan as well, man. Well, Sherri, Coach Coale, thank you for joining us today. We always wrap up though with the 4 questions with 40 athletes. These are quick lightning round questions. The first thing that comes to your head. So the first one is, what is the best life lesson sports has taught you?
Giving is more important than receiving.
I like that. Yeah, I can't argue with that one. Now, number 2, if you could spend time with anyone you admire in sports, passed away, alive, fictional, non-fictional, who would it be and why would you pick that person?
Oh, well, the easy go-to is John Wooden. No doubt about that. And I would be drawn there because I would want to ask him how he would roll his way into today's world. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's what we're all after. And we all know that that's the essence of sport, that it helps us live better. And he probably taught those things better than anybody. I'd want to know how he would do it in this crazy world.
Like that. What's the best advice you ever received from a coach you worked for or played for?
Well, I'll tell you one that's sort of off the court, but it applies everywhere. It really does apply on the court too. When I got ready to interview for the job at the University of Oklahoma, Gino Auriemma told me that there'd be one person in the room that didn't want me to get the job. And my job was to figure out who that was and win them over. And if I did, I would get the job. This was a committee interviewing, obviously. And that stuck with me. I knew immediately. Within about 3-4 minutes, I knew exactly who it was. And that has been a lesson that has stayed with me because I taught a class just last week, just we're on campus. And there's one kid in the back that wasn't with me. And I taught in such a way to get that kid. You get him, you got everybody. You already had half of them anyway. But you find that as a coach on the court. Find the one who's not there, who's not getting it. Teach and coach toward them. And I think that's a great piece of advice for whatever venue you find yourself in.
I know this is lightning round, Jason, but I have to ask this. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt this sometimes because I do this. So you said to win them over in the, you had the interview process and you had the board. How did you go about winning that person over?
A lot of eye contact, engagement. If I'm asked a question, I start answering the question and maybe ask one as a part of that answer and direct it toward that individual. You can tell if you pay attention, you can tell when they're flying, whizzing right past the ears of the people, or they're landing somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And when something would land, I would just stay on that and find a way to get inside the vein, if you will. And that individual, as an aside, became a season ticket holder and a loyal follower of our program for 20 plus years.
That's awesome. The last question is this: if you had one character trait or life skill that somebody you're recruiting to be a part of your program or hiring to work for you, what would it be?
I'm going to say hunger / growth mindset. Somebody who wants to learn and grow, if you could find a way to identify insatiable curiosity in another human being, I'm convinced that you could put together championship team after championship team after championship team. It's just a characteristic that's very difficult to identify. And I think it's the secret to success in whatever you're doing. If you're hungry enough, you'll find out how to do it.
That's why they need to read your blog. Read the one about curiosity, the monkey, Curious George, right?
Curious George is on my wall right here in my
Really
office. I keep him on my wall.
Well, yeah, Coach Coale, man, this is a great conversation. Thank you for all your shared wisdom, your insights. How can people find your blog, your website? Where can they learn more about Coach Coale?
Well, this is pretty funny because I'm like technologically impaired. I'm not very good, as you know, Jason, as we tried to get on this today. And so when I wanted to get some of my writing out there, and everybody said, you got to get a website. And I was like, okay, what should I call it? And they said, well, you should call it your name. It should be sherricoale.com. And I'm like, oh no, that's horrible. No, I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. And they're like, how else are people going to find it? Okay, that made some sense to me. So that's how you find it. sherricoale.com is my website. It's a clean site, and that's where if you are interested in having me speak, I do all kinds of speaking engagements, or I do a little bit of consulting and some writing, and just love the regularness of regularity, I should say, of the blog. It comes out every Tuesday at 10 a.m. And if you sign up, you get a newsletter once a month for free, and it's all for free. And it's just, it's really a joy for me to sit down and write. And if people read it and it affects them and they think or they feel, then that's the win for me. We talked about earlier how you identify that. That's the win for me. If people read something and it pricks their imagination or reminds them of something or makes them think about something in a different way, then I feel rewarded by that. So thank you guys for reading. You've obviously been reading them, and thank you so much.
By the way, Coach Coale, I'm being dead serious. It's really well done. The writings of it, a lot of good things. And there's one on there too. I challenge people to go through. I didn't talk about, well, you talk about the it factor, which Roger Starbuck in there, but you had the one, I think it was Music is the Medicine. I think it was.
Yeah.
One of them, you have a bunch of different, you have one of them. Maybe it's not that one. I'm trying to think which one it is. You had it. I was looking at, God, you had a listing of a bunch of different, coach's playlist.
Yeah.
That was a good one too. You got a bunch of different songs and a coach's playlist on it. And the videos in it at the end of it to relate to it. It's well done. I would suggest anyone to go ahead and go onto the site and look at it. I really enjoyed it.
Well, Thank you. I appreciate that. And that one, the only rules I gave myself on that, I was on a walk one day, and Teach Your Children, Crosby, Stills and Nash, came up on my playlist, a random shuffle. And I thought, boy, isn't that the truth? That's exactly what, as coaches, that's the most important priority. And as I walked along, I was like, boy, I bet I have several that would speak to coaches. And so as I wrote that one, my only fence, if you will, my only boundary was it had to actually be on my podcast. It couldn't just be a title of a song that I thought spoke to a coach. It had to be something on my
something
podcast.
You listen to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it got 38 special and,
Well, the thing is, Ted Lasso would love it. You have "Don't Stop Believing," right? I mean,
That's right.
Absolutely.
He'd
You
love
can't have
that
a
one right
playlist
there.
without Journey. That's un-American.
That's right. Find joy in the journey, right? Absolutely. That's the saying, right?
Absolutely.
Coach Coale, enjoy the rest of your Friday. And, we are looking forward to sharing your blog out to our audience to share your wisdom and insight. So remember, sherricoale.com. And Coach Coale, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. You were terrific. I appreciate
Coach
it.
Coale.
Thanks for the work you do.
Take care. God bless.
Well, Jimmy, Billy Graham said it best. A coach will change more lives in a year than most people will in a lifetime. And with our 40 Athletes program, we are resources for coaches to magnify their message and intensify their influence to help them develop great people who become great players. Jimmy, where can we learn more about how to find our 40 Athletes program?
You go to 40athletes.com. And like I said, if you have you're a coach or, administrative organization, reach out to us. You can do a discovery call. We can show you how we can, partner with you, to be able to help your athletes win the game of life. And I think, Coach Coale said it best where she talks about we're teachers, right? And we get so much focused on the winning on the scoreboard, and we lose sight that we have this sport to really teach, to help people become better, individuals through the sports we're coaching. So I feel like we have a responsibility, and I hope more individuals, listen to Coach Coale and basically put, this into their, coaching on their daily life, but with all the teams they have to really make everybody better around them.
Absolutely, Jimmy. Like we say at 40 Athletes, it's more than the score. So, well, Jimmy, next week, man, we got an athletic director that was the president of the National Athletic Directors Association. So we go from legendary coach to a high-level athletic director. So it's the yin and the yang here this next couple of weeks, man. So
look forward to it. Well, Coach Jason, thanks for the opportunity to be on today with Coach Coale, and hope you have a blessed day, buddy.
Hey, you too, man. All right. Talk to you soon.